Okay. Okay. Hopefully we're back up. So, all right. Well, apologize everybody. And nobody's going to be watching this because they don't know to click on the new stream. Damn, didn't think of that.
If they're no,
Okay.
if they've taken some of our suggestions, if they like this and they
Yeah.
subscribe and hit the
Yeah.
notification bell, it should have popped back up for
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. So, well, we'll okay. So there's somebody that's joined on. So if you notice the old stream quit, and if you notice you can click on a new stream, we've created a new stream. So we're kind of starting over here again this morning on Ask the Agronomist. So apologize for the clunkiness, but we had some connectivity issues and ended up starting a new stream. So if you're still in the old one, there's nothing happening in the old one. And if you're not in the new one, then I can't talk to you. But hopefully people will find their way to this new stream. We're going to continue the conversation. If you don't find it live, it'll be posted um, in the recorded version, and I'll see if Jennifer can help us with making sure that people recognize that this episode kind of got broken up into two different recordings. So anyway, back on the soybean and nitrogen conversation. So it takes over 400 pounds to the acre of nitrogen to produce a high yielding soybean crop. Soybeans use and require a tremendous amount of nitrogen. Now, most of the nitrogen that soybeans need, they fix through the nodules. So the rhizobia bacteria that's in the soil, or that you add to your seed treatment, if you believe in using inoculant, infects the root, colonizes the roots of the soybeans, and those nodules in a symbiotic relationship with the soybean plant are taking sugars and nutrients from the soybean to feed that bacteria. In exchange, the bacteria is making nitrogen that the soybean plant uses. In theory, soybeans can fix enough nitrogen to raise about 70 bushels. If you're going above 70 bushels, that nitrogen is going to have to either come from fertilizer or going to have to come from the soil. So soybeans are good scavengers of nitrogen, just like any growing plant is. So soybeans are not that much different than me. They're inherently lazy, and they're going to use the free nitrogen in the soil first. And they can utilize nitrogen in the soil just like a corn crop can. So soybeans actually take nitrogen from the soil, and there is less leftover nitrogen laying around in the soil at the end of a year of soybeans than there was at the beginning of the year of soybeans. So soybeans are not leaving nitrogen laying in your soil for your corn crop to use. There is not a lot of nitrogen in the soybean residue either, because where does nitrogen go that the soybean plant either takes up or produces? It goes into the grain. Soybeans are a protein crop. Protein contains a lot of nitrogen, and it takes a lot of nitrogen to make protein. When you harvest the grain, you're taking all the nitrogen with you. So the only way that soybeans would actually leave a lot of nitrogen in the soil is if you plowed them under when they were green and used them like a green manure crop. And in that scenario, a lot of the nitrogen that they'd been fixing and taking in and using to make seed would be left in the soil to feed your crop. And there are people that do use soybeans and other legumes such as clover, alfalfa that way to supply nitrogen to corn. But if you harvest the grain and the only thing left in your field is the soybean residue and what's left of the soybean root mass, there's not much nitrogen that's going to be released from that residue as it breaks down. So I see a few more people have found us over here in the new episode, Adam. So apologize to those of you who are just joining. Something crashed on the old stream. Had to create a new stream. When you create a new stream, when you end the old stream, you can't start it up again. And so I had to create a new live stream. And there's really no way to let you know that we had to do that. So hopefully you notice that a new live stream has been started and you jump over and join us here. So why can you get by with less nitrogen following soybeans than you can corn on corn? It's primarily because the residue that's laying in your field, and the residue can be from any crop. So it could be wheat stubble, could be corn stover, could be soybean residue, could be any form of residue. That residue is going to be decomposed by microbes. If it is a high carbon residue, which wheat stover, wheat stubble, corn stover, anything like that is very high in carbon. So if it has a high C to N ratio, which means it's got a lot more carbon in it than it does nitrogen, the microbes that are breaking down that residue have to balance that out. And the way they balance that ratio out is they take nitrogen out of the soil. They tie up a lot of nitrogen. They fix a lot of nitrogen. So your corn crop, when it's in a corn on corn scenario, is fighting against the soil microbial biomass for nitrogen, because the soil microbial biomass is going to absorb a tremendous amount of nitrogen out of that soil to enable it to break down that high carbon residue. That doesn't happen in first year corn because it doesn't require a lot of nitrogen from the soil for the microbes to break down soybean residue for two reasons. One, there's a heck of a lot less of it to decompose. And two, the carbon to nitrogen ratio is more balanced in soybean stubble. So they don't have to take as much nitrogen out of the soil to balance that C to N ratio. So that's why Dr. Bilo wishes we would call it a corn on corn penalty, because that's really what's happening. The soil microbes in that corn on corn environment are tying up a lot of nitrogen, fixing a lot of nitrogen, making a lot of nitrogen unavailable to your corn crop. If there's a tug of war going on between a microbe and a corn root, the microbe's going to win. So you have to have enough extra nitrogen in that soil in a corn on corn environment so that once the microbes get done taking what they're going to take and tying up what they're going to tie up, there's still enough left that the corn plant doesn't feel it's been shorted. Now, the positive side of this is that nitrogen that gets fixed and tied up in that microbial biomass cannot be leached, cannot be denitrified, cannot be lost. And as that residue decomposes, that nitrogen will be released by those microbes when they no longer need it, and it will potentially be released back into your corn crop at a beneficial time of year. So that's why in some situations, we actually see corn on corn out yielding rotated ground, because you might have gotten a lot of nitrogen, immobilized nitrogen, released to that corn crop in, say, the middle or latter part of July at just the perfect timing when that plant really, really was looking for, a lot of nitrogen, and voila, it gets released by the microbes. The challenge is you can't control when that's going to happen. You don't have any idea whether the plant's going to benefit when that happens. You don't have any idea whether it needs more nitrogen when that happens. But that nitrogen is going to come back to your corn crop at some point in time. But if it comes back to that corn crop at a time when it didn't need it, it's not really going to benefit from it. If it comes back to that corn crop too late in the season for it to utilize it, it's not going to benefit from it. And so we have to use more nitrogen in our corn on corn situation, not because there's a soybean credit, but because there's no corn residue to deal with, to speak of. There could be a little bit of 2-year-old corn residue in a field of first-year corn following soybeans. This is also the reason why you should not monkey around with your nitrogen credit. I'm gonna use the term I hate, based on the yield of your soybeans. There are some people running around out there that talk about, a 40 bushel, for years and years and years, we talked about a 40 bushel credit or a 40 pound credit. Well, some people started to equate pounds and bushels, and, soybeans, as yields climbed, some people started to recommend, well, if you had 60 bushel beans, maybe you could leave a 60 pound credit. If you had 80 bushel soybeans, can I leave an 80 pound credit? How big can that credit be? The difference is about 40 or 50 units between corn on corn and rotated ground, regardless of what your soybeans yield. If you had, double crop soybeans that made 25 bushel, or you had April planted soybeans that made 100, there's not really any difference in how much nitrogen you ought to apply on next year's corn crop based on the soybean crop that you had in your field. The difference comes in, is there corn residue in that field or not that has to be decomposed? And if there is, that means you need to apply more nitrogen to make up for that. So that's the conversation I wanted to have on, nitrogen rates, and that doesn't tell you what the right rate of nitrogen is. And if you ask 10 different people what the right rate of nitrogen is, you're going to get 10 different answers. And I will also tell you this about, about how some people leave a quote unquote credit for soybeans. If your standard practice is to put on 230 units of nitrogen on first year corn, you can leave a pretty big credit because you're over applying nitrogen in the first place. If you're only putting 120 units of nitrogen on first year corn, well, then you better not be leaving much of a credit for your soybeans because you're at the bottom end of applying enough nitrogen in the first place. So it really depends on philosophically, how much nitrogen do you like to use and where are you at in that rate spectrum, what you can get away with calling a soybean credit. But I just wanted to explain to everybody why the term soybean credit really shouldn't be the way we talk about it, because I can certainly understand when we call it a credit, well, that sounds like the soybeans are leaving nitrogen for your corn, and they're not. So just wanted to walk through that. So again, I apologize for the technical difficulties we've had here today. We had to start a new stream, so I know there's only 3 of you or 4 of you watching now, and we had a pretty big crowd in the original stream, and not everybody. There's really no good way for us to notify people that we had to create a new stream. So if you just happen to notice that a new stream has been created, click on it, and you'll be here with us. This will be recorded there. The first part of the program that was in the original stream will be recorded, but we're a little bit disjointed here this morning, and apologize for that with some technical issues.
Go to the channel, and it's Ask the Agronomist Season 2, Episode 23, Part 2.
Okay, yeah.
Make sure, again, if you didn't hear before because of technical difficulty, hopefully we won't have too many technical difficulties, and we've been having a really good run on those technical difficulties.
Yeah.
But again, if you subscribe and you hit that notification bell to be notified of when a video is either posted to our channel or when we're doing Ask the Agronomist Live, it'll pop up on your device, your iPad, your phone, probably on your computer as well if you're watching on your computer, and make sure that you guys can click back in if we do have a technical difficulty in the future.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Adam. So we kind of talked about the whole soybean related to nitrogen rate. Let's talk a little bit about the fate of fall nitrogen. We did have a really good run of a lot of days when it was really perfect soil conditions for applying fall nitrogen. There's been a tremendous amount of fall nitrogen applied. There were concerns about supply. There were concerns about price. There were concerns about logistical challenges, and so there were lots of good reasons to not fiddle around and not get your fall nitrogen done. So a lot of people were kind of willing to take advantage of the good field conditions that we had. Unfortunately, we had a lot of really abnormally fall or warm fall days. We had days when it was in the upper 70s in the fall. We had soil temperatures that had dropped to below 50 degrees before most people started applying fall nitrogen, but they didn't stay below 50 degrees. And so I've had a lot of producers asking questions a little nervously about, well, what's the effect of these warm soils on my fall nitrogen? And did I make a mistake putting that fall nitrogen on? My first thing would be to say that no, you did not make a mistake doing that. I think in most cases we're using a nitrification inhibitor. We need to be. If you're not going to use a nitrification inhibitor, you need to do one of two things. You either need to take a chance and wait till late November or December to put your nitrogen on, or you need to not apply it in the fall at all. If you're going to go early, you need to have an inhibitor. It needs to be at a full rate, and you need to recognize that inhibitor doesn't last forever. Depending on who you ask, depending on what research you look at, you're probably going to get 2 weeks on the short side to maybe 4 weeks on the back side of protection. And the way the inhibitor works is the cooler the soil is, the longer it lasts also. So it's going to break down faster in warm soils. It breaks down gradually. It's not like it's there to, it's just like a herbicide. Herbicides do not sit there at a full rate and then go to nothing overnight. They gradually decline as they degrade in the soil. The inhibitor is going to work the same way. So really what that inhibitor is doing is it's buying you some protection against warm fall soil temperatures. And it's going to help keep that nitrogen from getting into the nitrate form. It is inhibiting the bacteria in the soil that is causing the nitrification process to occur. The reason we don't want that anhydrous to get to nitrate in the fall is because nitrate is mobile in the soil. It can be leached to groundwater. It can be leached to a tile line. It can be denitrified in a saturated ponded soil. But bad things can happen to our nitrogen if it gets into the nitrate form in the fall. If you put anhydrous on in August and don't use an inhibitor, or even if you did use an inhibitor and put it on in August, it's going to all convert to nitrate in the fall. And that would be no different than using UAN in the fall. That nitrogen is going to be in a losable form through the whole winter, and it's going to be in a losable form through the whole spring. We're not going to lose nitrogen in the winter. So even if your nitrogen got converted to nitrate in October, you're not going to lose it in the winter. You're going to lose it in the spring when it's wet. So producers that have been nervous about well, what happened if my nitrogen was on too early? What happened if some of it got converted to nitrate? How much of it am I going to lose? We don't really know the answers to any of those questions, but we do know this: if you applied early and you had a lot of warm weather following the application, and we would happen to have a warm, wet winter, and we would happen to have a warm, wet spring. And in worst case scenario, we would have a warm, wet spring followed by delayed planting. That would be the worst case scenario. If you had some nitrogen that got converted to nitrate in the fall, and we have a cold, dry winter, and we have a normal to dry spring, and we're able to plant early, and we don't have big rains in April and May, probably no harm has been done. The vast majority, and there's been a lot of research done to show this, because fall nitrogen has kind of had a target on its back for a lot of years, and a lot of the recent research has shown that's kind of unfair, because we actually do not lose typically more nitrogen from an acre of fall applied in than we do spring applied in, because the vast majority of nitrogen that we lose from cornfields in central Illinois, we lose it in June. Wet Mays and wet Junes are what causes us to lose nitrogen rather than fall applications. So whether you put your nitrogen on in October, November, December, February, March, or April, if you get a wet June, you're going to lose nitrogen. And that's what the research has shown is most of the nitrogen that we lose, we're losing it during the growing season. We're not losing it in the fall. We're not losing it in the winter. We're not really losing it in the early spring either. It tends to be late spring, early summer when most of our nitrogen losses occur, regardless of when you applied that nitrogen. So I wouldn't panic about the fate of your fall applied in. I do think it would be good to maybe revisit this conversation next spring when we see, what kind of winter did we have? What kind of an early spring have we had? How wet has it been? Could we plant timely? And you can probably use some of those factors as indicators to help you make the decision. Should I be conservative, and should I apply a little more nitrogen just in case I have lost something that I applied in the fall? So we'll revisit that probably in late April or May, when we maybe have a little bit of an indication better than we do now of what the fate of that product might have been. So with that, I'll pause here. I probably don't have any questions in the chat, do we, Adam? I
Not right now.
don't know if we even have anybody watching, to be quite honest with you.
We got
But
7 right now.
So that's good. We got a few people that have found us here in the new stream. So once again, if you've heard me explain the new stream 3 times, I'm sorry. But as people join and find us over here on the new stream, I like to kind of explain why there is a new stream. I want to talk a little bit about, and this kind of relates to nitrogen as well, but I want to talk a little bit about corn on corn management And I've been a little bit surprised in some ways, but it makes sense in other ways how much talk there is about corn on corn for next year. And if you look at current grain prices, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's the ratio of corn to soybean prices is kind of out of whack relative to normal. So relatively speaking, corn is at a higher price point than soybeans. And even with the input costs where they are, if you do the math, if you can raise a good yield corn on corn is a lot more profitable than soybeans right now today. Now, who knows what you're going to sell next year's crop for next year? Who knows what that ratio would be? You know, I'm not on my own farm. I'm not a big corn on corn guy. I'm all no till or strip till. That's just the way I like to farm, and corn on corn makes that really challenging and really risky from a grain quality and disease standpoint. And rotated corn is just easier. So you know you just don't have as much risk. You don't have as many problems. But you know, if the economics of corn on corn look irresistibly good to you, my recommendations would be several. You know, first I would say, you know, people that do corn on corn the best generally are doing tillage. I Corn on corn and strip till corn on corn scare me. I've seen some really bad diplodia over the years in those two environments. So just be aware that if you're going to no till or strip till corn on corn, you are taking as an elevated risk of having, you know, a very serious diplodia problem if we get the right kind of weather for diplodia to be bad. And vertical tilling the stalks before you make your strips really isn't doing anything to reduce your diplodia pressure. You have to not size residue, you have to bury residue or remove residue to reduce your potential risk for diplodia. So just be aware of that. So I think the people that I see having the most success corn on corn consistently, they have a plan. So some of the biggest disasters I've seen corn on corn are late decisions to switch to corn on corn. So let's say, you know, April 15th, we decide, oh, I want to do some corn on corn. We haven't touched those corn stalks. We haven't done anything to get ready to be successful with corn on corn. That's asking for trouble. So if you want to do corn on corn, have a plan how you're going to manage that residue. Have a plan how you're going to manage the fertility. Have a plan of, you know, picking the right hybrid for that field, and plan on going to corn on corn, you know, in the fall. And so that way you can do everything right to get set up to have success. Another thing I think is very important, and I'm a little bit nervous about this with nitrogen prices where they are. I think there's more and more people that are tempted to do 100% of their nitrogen as anhydrous and pull out the spring UAN application they've been making because of the price difference between what you could have bought fall anhydrous for in, say, August or September, and what you're going to end up paying for UAN in the spring. So in theory, a pound of nitrogen is a pound of nitrogen. And in theory, you could do that. You could shift, you know, let's say you normally apply 85% of your N as fall anhydrous and 15% is pre-plant UAN as a carrier with your chemical. Well, why can't I just put 100% on in the fall and save my money on that spring UAN application? A pound is a pound. I'm still putting on the same amount of nitrogen. Hell, maybe I'll even put on an extra 10 or 15 pounds in the fall just to make up for that, because just in case and whatever. Here's what you can't make up for in that scenario. That seedling corn plant that is growing in that corn on corn residue that is fighting with the soil microbes for nitrogen does not even know that anhydrous application is there. That product, even if it's in the nitrate form, the day the corn plant comes up, it is at a depth that corn plant roots are not. So that corn plant is going to grow for, I don't know, at least 45 days, probably, maybe sometimes longer in that soil before it even has access to that fall anhydrous application that you've made. And that is the primary reason why I do not, no matter what it costs, want to quit making those spring UAN applications. And I would urge you to be cautious about even reducing the rate of those spring UAN applications. The ugliest corn I look at every spring is corn on corn with no spring nitrogen applied. So if you're using fall anhydrous, I take that back. Now there is one uglier than that. So spring anhydrous corn on corn with no UAN would be the ugliest corn that I look at in the spring, because that nitrogen is even unavailable to that plant for a longer period of time. So that spring UAN application, either as a broadcast with the chemical carrier or starter on your planter or an in-furrow pop-up on your planter, however you can get nitrogen to that seedling corn plant, that's important. Because if that seedling corn plant starts out its life feeling like it's in a nitrogen limiting environment, it is going to reduce its yield potential. Our high yield corn contest winners have taught us that. That's one thing those guys learned early on. If that corn plant ever senses that, ooh, I think I'm a little short on N, it gets real conservative. And a conservative corn plant sets a potentially small ear. And once you set a potentially small ear, there ain't a damn thing you can do to make it bigger. You can make the kernels bigger if you have, everything else going for you like we did this year, but you can't add kernels to it once it has determined that it's going to be small. And a corn plant has the ability to sense its environment. It can sense population. It can sense crowding. There's been some really interesting research done to show why early season weed pressure hurts corn yield so much, because that corn plant can't really tell, is that 1,000 foxtail plants next to me, or is that 1,000 corn plants next to me? But it knows there's something next to it. And if it feels crowded, it knows it's going to have a hard life. And if it knows it's going to have a hard life, it's not real optimistic about what its prospects for that hard life are. So it reduces its potential ear size to try to deal with the difficult life that it senses is coming. And so having proper nitrogen fertility available to that corn plant every day in its life, even in the early days of its life, are important to setting yourself up for a good yield. And then, things like V5 fungicide, things like VT fungicide, things like being prepared for, whatever Mother Nature throws at you from a disease standpoint. One thing that is showing not to be worse corn on corn actually is tar spot. And that's a little surprising to pathologists, a little surprising to corn farmers, a little surprising to agronomists, but we keep seeing it. The tar spot fungus, the spores that are traveling around, are apparently mobile enough that it's just kind of in the air and it's just kind of everywhere. And so, every cornfield is an equal opportunity infection site for tar spot. So we actually don't tend to see heavier tar spot pressure corn on corn. But other diseases, such as gray leaf spot, crown rot, diplodia, anthracnose, some of the other baddies out there that you could think of after tar spot, definitely are worse corn on corn. Southern rust is another one that's not particularly rotation influenced, because southern rust is not coming from your residue, it's coming from the south, and those spores are blowing up on the summer winds. So I would say southern rust and tar spot could be just as bad in first year corn, but most of our other diseases are going to be potentially worse corn on corn. The other thing that's obviously potentially worse corn on corn is corn rootworm. So if you've been, planting a lot of double pro or Tricepta hybrids because, you've heard somebody say, or you've experienced yourself, that it just seems like they yield better in a non-rootworm environment, that may be true. In some cases, it certainly is true. But you should never assume that corn on corn is going to be a non-rootworm environment. The odds of a non-Smart Stacks product out yielding Smart Stacks corn on corn, I think, are pretty slim. And as corn room populations increase, and that's another thing we saw some data on yesterday, that corn rootworm populations are continuing to increase. It still looks like in most cases pressure is very, very low on rotated ground. But over the last 5 years, there's been quite a few acres of corn on corn that hasn't really even had a lot of rootworm pressure. And there may be some of you, either intentionally or by mistake, planted a double pro hybrid or a Tricepta hybrid with no soil insecticide, corn on corn, and it did great. If that was your experience, I'm glad you got away with it. I'd say don't make a habit out of it, because if you're in Central Illinois, odds are you've got some rootworm pressure in your second year corn. Is it enough to cause a double pro hybrid to be a disaster? Maybe not. Is it enough to trim the yield of that product so that there really isn't a yield advantage for it over Smart Stacks? I'd say in many cases, yes. And in some cases, there's enough pressure there that you could have standability issues. You could have severe yield loss. So while you're trying to gain 5 or 10 bushels of yield potential, if you lose 30 or 40 bushels of real corn from rootworm feeding, that's just not worth the risk. So I would say if it's corn on corn, it needs to be Smart Stacks. In our market, it probably doesn't have to be Smart Stacks Pro. As you go to Northern Illinois, they're very quickly going to convert to Pro because it is a higher level of root protection than you're going to get from Smart Stacks. But in our moderate pressure environment that we're in, Smart Stacks is still performing very well. If you do long-term continuous corn in Central Illinois, those are the acres that I probably would upgrade to Smart Stacks Pro on. If it's just regular old second year corn, I'd say Smart Stacks would be would perform very, very well on that. Question, Adam, or comment? No? Okay. So I think that's some of the stuff I want to touch on with corn on corn management. And I know some of you, are excellent corn on corn farmers, and you've got your system. You know what works for you, and 4 years out of 5, you're going to achieve a yield of your corn on corn that's pretty similar to rotated acres. And if you can raise corn on corn and get yields close to rotated acres, corn on corn will be more profitable. So you aren't going to spend enough more money on your corn on corn to make it less profitable. What makes corn on corn less profitable is a 20, 30, 40 bushel yield hit on those corn on corn acres versus what rotated ground would have yielded. If you can manage that yield hit, you're probably going to have improved profitability with your corn on corn, and that's what the guys that like doing it count on. The other benefit to corn on corn is it's going to make your soybeans yield more too. So that's where you can kind of have some even more gravy coming out of the system if you can manage your corn on corn successfully, and if you can maintain your yield or close to maintain their yield. I tell people what I would consider a good yield from corn on corn would be 5 to 10% less than rotated acres. I do not think it's realistic to expect to maintain yield. It's certainly not realistic to expect it to be better. I would say optimistically, you could try to be within 5%, which, 5% of 200 bushel is 10 bushel. So if your corn on corn is averaging within 10 to 15 bushel of your rotated acres, I think you're doing fabulous. In a bad corn on corn year, the yield difference is probably going to be 10% or more. So we're talking a 20 to 30 bushel gap there. And there are situations where it can be more than that when something goes wrong. But, I would say somewhere in that 5 to 10% range would be a good assumption that, of what you ought to make your corn on corn yielding less than rotated ground. I think you can gain back a portion of that because your soybeans following second year corn are going to yield more than 50-50 rotated beans. So you can gain back some of that yield loss that you experience on corn with a yield gain that you will experience on soybeans. And the more years of corn you do, so if you look at, a 3-to-1 rotation instead of it, so you got 50-50, you got 2-to-1, you got 3-to-1, you got 4-to-1. I would discourage anybody from doing corn continuously. I don't really like a continuous corn rotation. That's going to result in a rootworm problem somewhere, someday, sometime. And if you haven't experienced that yet, I would emphasize the word yet. So I believe in very strongly that we want to see soybeans in every field at least 1 year out of 5. So, if you're doing a 3-to-1 or a 4-to-1 rotation, that's about as far as I would push it. But those soybeans will be even better than a 2-to-1 rotation. And so, we definitely do. That's the irony of soybeans. The less often you grow them, the better they will be. There is definitely a strong, well-proven, not necessarily well understood, but well proven that it exists, positive yield response to longer rotations with soybeans. So we talked about soybean credit, inoculant, corn on corn. So one thing Adam and I were kind of joking about a little bit before we started was, as we're having conversations with our good customers this time of year about next year's planting plans. Farmers get frustrated. I had a good customer that he sent me a text yesterday. He says, "Hey, would you send me an email with your thoughts on corn hybrids for my farm for next year?" So I thought, gosh, how many hours should I spend composing that email? And I took about 15 minutes, so it didn't take that long. And I made a list. So he does some corn on corn, so I made a list of Smart Stacks options, and I made a list of non-Smart Stacks options, and I just put like one short, brief line description of where I thought that hybrid might work for him. And I sent that to him. I sent it to him with a note at the bottom that said, "Now I know there's more on this list than you're ever going to want to plant. I'm just throwing out some options. Take a look at it. See what you think might fit." Well, his initial reaction was, even though I tried to preface and tried to prevent this reaction from happening, he's like, "Man, there's more hybrids on this list than there is in the seed guide," which there's not. It was a subset of the seed guide, but it was a long list of products. There was probably 15, 16 hybrids probably on this list. And I knew he wasn't going to plant 15 hybrids. I don't even ask anybody to plant 15 hybrids. I only ask you to plant 10. So that's how nice I am. I'm only going to ask you to plant 10 hybrids. You want what, like 3, 4? So I started thinking about farmers get frustrated with too many seed products. And we've got lots of new products coming. So we got VT4 Pro we've talked about. We got Smart Corn coming. We got Smart Stacks Pro. We've got all these different corn products, and within each of those trait groups and with each of those product categories, we're going to have a lot of different hybrids to choose from. And so I get how you get frustrated with there's too many choices. How am I supposed to pick? How am I supposed to decide? And I started thinking about paint, and paint is something that freaks me out. Like corn hybrids options might freak you out. And so I went to Google. I was curious how many different shades of off-white are there? Because I thought, well, okay, here's an area where I can sympathize with you, the DeKalb seed customer, with all the different options of corn hybrids we have. When I'm standing in a paint store, usually with my wife, looking at paint and looking at that wall of colors, I need like a white, a gray, a beige, a dark brown, and a black. That somewhere between white and black. That's all that there needs to be. But anyway, according to Google, and it depends on the paint company you pick, and I won't name any names, but the least number of off-white versions that any paint company I looked at offered was 157. So I'm thinking about in my own house. I think my living room wall is actually called Snow Ballet, I believe was the name of that off-white. And wherever that snow was flying, they need some more cover crops and some more residue and some more no-till, because that snow was a little bit brown there in the Snow Ballet. But it's basically white, but yet it's not white. And so we've got all these different little subtle differences between corn hybrids. And we end up with so many products because there's so many different farmers out there. Everybody has different things that they like. And Adam and I were joking about, no matter how much precision and time and effort and data and how heavily we scrutinize it, and we'll sit down with you and we'll position it by field and population and management practices and agonize over, well, should I pick this one or should I pick this one or should I pick this one? I'll give you a little hint. there's probably 5 to 10 hybrids that would work on any field you have, and there wouldn't be a nickel's worth of difference between any of them. So just pick one. And what happens is you go through all that effort to get that perfect plan, and then what happens? Spring happens, and that plan goes out the window. And we just got to get something in the ground, and there's something in the planter, and it was supposed to go in this field, but that field's too wet, or something happened. It goes, it'll be fine. Just go plant. And so all of that careful preparation that we make kind of gets thrown out the window when spring happens. And that's why at DeKalb we focus a lot on broadly adapted hybrids that work in a lot of given situations, because we know that we can't predict the future. You can't predict the future. You can't control what happens on your farm in the spring. And so you need products that are broadly adapted and good in a lot of different situations. And we end up with a whole plethora of products, and more than anybody is ever going to plant on their farm. And as more of these new products come out, that's only going to get worse, frankly. So that's something that we have to deal with as a company. But if you're planting hybrids that are broadly adapted, high yielding, good genetics, got the right characteristics, the right traits you're looking for, there's probably multiple options for that. And I guarantee you, no matter how obscure some hybrid is, you've never even heard of it, you look at it in the book, well, who'd ever plant that piece of crap? There's somebody out there, that's their favorite hybrid, and they're going to be upset when we quit growing it. So there's I've seen corn hybrids that only a corn breeder could love, but somebody out there, that's their favorite. And so we try to have what everybody wants. We can't please everybody. Trying to please everybody is how you end up with a catalog that's got 200 corn hybrids in it, and you wonder, why in the hell do you have 200 corn hybrids? And then you wonder, why in the hell are there still 50 seed companies? And every 50 seed company's got 200 hybrids, and so it's just exponentially. So I understand it gets a little intense, but plant 6, 8, 10 if you can, different hybrids. Try not to put more than, I'm going to say, 1/4 of your acres in any particular genetic family. And I think you'll be successful. So, Adam, anything coming in on the chat or anything?
Nope.
Okay.
No chat questions.
All right. So I want to touch on
What's
that
TDS?
Oh, well, I was gonna talk about that. We're not supposed to be political when we do things, but I'm going to give a shout out to all of us who like to follow politics, and everybody's distraught, right? Nobody's happy. So if you're a conservative, the invisible red wave was a disappointment. If you're a good liberal, you're struggling with TDS this week. And Adam asked what TDS is. Well, that's Trump derangement syndrome. And now that Trump is officially back in the race for 24, so everybody's got something that's frustrating them, and there's a lot of if you get tired of talking about agronomic things that frustrate you, we can talk about politics a little bit. So that's what TDS is, Adam.
Okay.
So
I kind of pride myself on knowing a fair amount about agronomics,
Yeah.
TDS, I don't know what syndrome that is.
That's right. That's right. Yep. Trump derangement syndrome. That's TDS. So anyway, I want to mention yield chasers again. So we've got I think there's some deadlines coming up, Adam. I don't know when they are. Do you? I'm putting you on the spot a little bit.
Yeah. So for yield chasers, we're trying to get things wrapped up here as quick as possible. Would be the opportunistic hope on yield chasers. I think we have to have it in by the end of December, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
I don't know off the top of my head, but
so
we got some really, really easy ways to enter into the yield chasers competition, and it's going to be a fun time in February, on February 2nd at Peoria Heights. That we're going to have some great speakers. Dr. Fred Bilo is going to be there, which Lance has referenced many times on Ask the Agronomist, because he does some really practical and applicable research with a lot of modern technologies and opportunities that are available for farmers. So,
and he's just damn fun to listen to too.
He's an excellent speaker.
Yep. So that'll be a lot of fun. So get your yield entries in. If you don't know how to enter into yield chasers, reach out to your dealer, reach out to your FSR, send Adam a text. we can help you get signed up. It's super easy. We are not, as anal as some people think we ought to be, because some people worry, well, it's kind of easy to cheat in your contest. It looks like, with letting you use yield monitor data and stuff. We're not encouraging cheating. We're just trying to make it simple. We're trying to make it fun. If you want to enter the NCGA yield contest, there's a whole other list of criteria. So if you want to do it the right way for NCGA, you can still qualify for ours. If you don't want to go to the effort required to do it the right way for NCGA, you can do it the easy way and enter the DeKalb Asgrow Yield Chaser Contest here for West Central Illinois. And we're looking forward to you guys sharing your good yields with us. I also want to call out, we are coming up on, believe it or not, the end of the second season of Ask the Agronomist, and we don't do seasons like the singing show contest shows. They somehow they get like 2 or 3 seasons out of a year, because there's shows that have been on for maybe 10 years that are in like their 25th season. I don't know how that happened. So we're coming up on the end of season 2, and last year at the end of season 1, you might remember we had a contest where we gave away some really highly sought after, I believe it was sold out at the time, Adam, DeKalb corn. And we're probably going to do something like that again this year. We got to work out the details of that. And I think we got 2 more episodes before the year-end episode. Adam, what's our dates? Correct. So we've got coming up in 2 weeks. December 1st, and then 15th. We've got December 15th, and then we'll probably take that next one off between Christmas and New Year's, and we'll start up again in January with season 3 if you'll have us back. So not 2 weeks from now, but 4 weeks from now will be our year-end episode of season 2, and we'll do something fun and probably give away some corn or something. We haven't quite decided yet. And we also, last year, what we did to qualify to have a chance to win, you had to have asked a question during the season on Ask the Agronomist. And Jennifer Elliott was gracious enough to go back through all the old episodes and tally up all the names of the people that had asked questions. And if Jennifer's willing to do that again, that may be the way we do it. And the reason I do that, and in full disclosure, is I want to give favoritism to my live audience. So the thing that we've always dreamed of having on Ask the Agronomist was a big live audience of people that are engaged in asking questions. So you're not supposed to have favorites, but I do have favorites, and my favorites are the people that ask questions. So thank you to our viewers that log in regularly, that watch the show live. Apologize to the live audience today, because today's live show was a bit clunky with needing to create the other stream. But we will have something. We'll probably get it. We'll figure out what we're going to do between now and the next episode. We will hype it a little more on the next episode coming up, and then we will have our grand prize drawing on that final year-ending episode, which I think Adam said would be December 15th.
Yep.
Right. So
co-producer, the person behind the curtain, Jennifer Elliott, my counterpart, she is put in the live chat of this second episode, or 23rd episode, part 2, I should say.
That's how you get 35 seasons in a year.
Yeah, exactly. I have some technical difficulties. She has put a link in there for Yield Chasers. So if you just copy that link into your browser, you should be able to walk through the entry process pretty easy. And she would like to have all that in by December 1st. So I misspoke.
Whoa.
December.
Ooh.
She'd like to have
I bet she was flipping out there.
She was not very happy with me, Lance.
Naughty. Yep. Okay, so December 1st would be your deadline for, and really, it is very easy to enter. So it doesn't take much of your time to get entered. So don't worry that you don't actually have the month of December to do it. It's not hard to get signed up, and we got a couple weeks left here in November, so we're good. So with that, any late questions snuck in before the end, Adam, or anything? Okay, no, says seeing none. So we'll go ahead and wrap up today's episode. And I appreciate you sticking with us. And sorry for the clunkiness of the episode here today. We'll hopefully won't have that occur again anytime soon. And thanks for your time. Thanks for your questions. Everybody stay safe. And we'll have, you'll probably all have your Thanksgiving gatherings before we're back together again. So everybody have a safe and bountiful Thanksgiving. And thanks for being with us.